think what's very important to understand is that this initiative really took place as a result over the past roughly 3 weeks, in which we began to discuss around the country the idea of coming to Washington. As you all understand, oftentimes our constituents don't end up here in D.C. to talk to our congressional representatives. There's roughly 50 or 60 congressional representatives on the Democrat House side which are clearly have not declared their positions on this new health care legislation. We've heard rumors that votes could be taken as early as Thursday or perhaps before the recess itself next week on the 18th. The President's clearly put the cards down. His objective is to pass health care at any cost to the Democratic Party and at any cost to America's opposition. A recent CNN poll had suggested that up to 75% of the population is indeed against this bill, particularly 55% against any bill in its current form, and roughly 20% who would prefer to see other forms of this reformation to take place. I think it's very important to understand that our objectives here are really to have a conversation with our congressional representatives. This is not about protest per se. This is not about having placards waved in people's face. This is about a dialogue with our representatives to understand why Americans want to be heard, why we want our voices understood, why we are against this particular bill, and we want to understand from our representatives why they're for this bill, why they want to vote for health care today. To take over, we have a number of speakers that will be able to share with us some of their ideas about this coming event. We'll talk a little bit about the logistics of this effort, the recruiting efforts, and in particular, delegations that are already on their way to Washington, D.C. But first, I'm very pleased to introduce Congresswoman Michele Bachmann from the 6th District in Minnesota. She has graced us here today to say some views about what's going on in Congress and to share her views about the health care legislation in particular. Congresswoman?
And address you just briefly on the health care issue. Number one, take the town halls to Washington, D.C. If there is nothing else to do, take the town halls to Washington, D.C. I don't know what it is about that these people don't understand, but they just don't get it. Starting with the uprisings last August, I think members of Congress were absolutely bowled over by what they saw coming from the heartland of America. They came back to Washington, D.C. in September. We thought that we had captured their attention, but they forgot once again. They got here under the bubble of Washington, under the thumb of Speaker Pelosi and the thumb of Harry Reid, and within distance of President Obama and Rahm Emanuel, and we saw them cave one by one and think, oh, I guess it's possible to pass health care. But then they heard from all of the folks back home. And the folks back home said, hey, don't you remember what we told you in August? We said no dice on health care. And then once again, we saw Speaker Pelosi want to bring the bill up. So what happened? We extended an emergency House call on Congress. Come, America, pay an emergency House call on Congress. People from all across the nation, from Alaska, Hawaii, spent their money to do what? Fight their government. This is almost impossible to believe that for nearly 14 months the American people have had to be suited up to fight the government that was put into office, who is no longer representing the will of the people. We just heard that from Mark Skoda. He said CNN came up with a poll that said clearly 3 out of 4 Americans want us to start over with health care bill and not have pause and take a big, deep breath and consider what's about to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then think of the sacrifice that went before. From the Revolutionary War, through the Civil War, through World War I, through World War II, through Korea, through Vietnam, through Iraq, through the men and women today who are bleeding for us in Afghanistan. We need to think about them, what they gave to us, and recognize if this goes down in the United States, where does anyone in any other country go to for freedom? Where do we go to for freedom? Look at the governor up in Canada who came down here a couple weeks ago to go down to Miami, Florida to get his heart surgery. He said, hey, I want to go where the best heart surgery is. That's why I'm going to the United States. Hey, just because I'm a politician doesn't mean I check my health care at the door. Oh, that's interesting. Did you know that the members of Congress aren't subject to this very bad health care bill? That's all you need to know to oppose this bill. It's good enough for you, but it's not good enough for them. Well, what do we have to say about that? Sorry, Charlie, we're not chumps. We are not going to stand for you passing this bill. So you better watch out. You pass this bill, you're done. And not only that, our mantra going forward is going to be this. We the people are going to roll them out. And when we roll them out, we're going to roll this bill back. But we don't want to get to that point. And that's why everything is about coming to Washington, D.C. now, before April 1st, and letting your voice be heard. You come here now. It's a matter of today, not later, because you won't have a chance later. So we've got to make our voice heard. We make phone calls. We email. We send faxes. But now is the time to see the whites of their eyes, and they need to see the whites of your eyes. Nothing frightens a member of Congress more than a freedom-loving American. So come to Washington, D.C. and take our country back.